Welcome, everyone. I want to thank all of you watching at home and to our panelists today for joining us on the Illinois stop of the Road to Universal Background Checks Tour. I'm Robin Lloyd, I'm Giffords Managing Director, and I have the honor of sharing the virtual stage today with my boss, former Congresswoman and Giffords co-founder Gabby Giffords, violence prevention activist Ke'Shon Newman, and Senator Dick Durbin. Today, we're going to shine a light on the positive impact that background checks will have on people here in Illinois. Universal background checks are a foundational step toward making our community safer from gun violence, and 9 out of 10 Americans agree. But we can't pass background checks without flipping the Senate to get a gun safety majority, which is where you come in. Not only does that mean re-electing Senator Dick Durbin here in Illinois, it also means working across the country to help elect Democrats to the Senate. This is something that we know Senator Durbin also does a lot of. We want to hear from you, the audience, in today's conversation. If you have questions, please put them into the comments section on Facebook or YouTube. And if you're watching on Twitter, please use the hashtag #GunSafetyCongress. Before we get into our conversation today, I want to share a little bit more about our panel, starting with Senator Dick Durbin. Senator Durbin was first elected to the United States Senate in 1996 after representing Central and Southern Illinois in the U.S. House of Representatives for 14 years. Today, he serves as the Democratic Whip, which is the second highest ranking Democrat in the Senate, and he serves on the Senate Judiciary, Appropriations, Agriculture, and Rules Committees. Senator Durbin is a leader on many issues, including international human rights, immigration reform, criminal justice reform, working to lower prescription drug prices, and protecting the Great Lakes. But he's also been a dedicated advocate and has spent his career working on gun safety measures, including cracking down on gun traffickers, finding funding for gun violence research, and community violence intervention programs. He has also consistently voted to support universal background checks. Senator Durbin, thanks for being here, and I'd like to turn it over to you to say a few words.
Robin, it's my honor to be with you. Of course, my good friend Gabby, she's a terrific member of Congress and now a national leader on this life and death issue that we're going to discuss today. And a guest that I've met over the air here, Ke'Shon Newman from the city of Chicago. Sadly, he is brought into this conversation because of a gun tragedy in his own family. But just a short conversation before we started tells me that he's doing his best to put his life on track for some very productive years ahead of him. Ke'Shon, we're proud that you're with us. We need to talk about Illinois and Chicago and gun violence. We estimate that so far this year, over 2,500 people have been shot in the city of Chicago. That's up some 760 over the same point just 1 year ago. What's wrong? What's going on in the city? We're awash with guns. There are guns in every direction. Ke'Shon can tell you that in the neighborhoods, young people can tell you they're only 15 minutes and $15 away from owning a gun and using it. And sadly, it's become part and parcel of gang warfare. Well, we have some decent laws in Illinois. It can be better, but the states around us are not giving us any help at all. Many of them are the suppliers of these crime guns. And that's one of the real problems that we need to address with the universal background check. In addition, what I've done is to try to get to know what's in the minds of the shooters and even the victims. And I've come to realize many of them have been victims of trauma themselves. So we're addressing that issue from another angle so that we can be sensitive to trauma and also calling for the leaders of our major hospitals to engage in this undertaking. I'm glad Giffords is here today. We need you in Illinois.
Thank you, Senator. Ke'Shon, I'd love to turn it over to you. Thank you again for being here. Would you be willing to share a little bit about you and your story?
Yes. So I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago, seeing just how safe it was to really be as a kid, walking down the street, not really knowing if he was going to lose a life today or be able to go to the park tomorrow, and just fearing to go to school and coming back the same day, having to walk with somebody just to feel safe. And it wasn't the case with my brother. He got caught away from the crowd and was gunned down, caught in the crossfire and shot 9 times and was killed the same day. And to have to now have to live inside the same community where I don't even know what the shooter is or what's going on inside of my communities around this corner or around that street. So it's just, it's traumatic to really walk around inside a community where you don't feel safe or don't feel like you can develop inside this community because you fear of being destroyed.
Thank you for sharing that. That is so upsetting to hear, and we're so grateful that you've lent your voice with us today, and all the work that you've done over the past number of years to honor your brother's legacy. And of course, we're so grateful that you were part of our very first Giffords Courage Fellows class, and we're so happy that you're able to be here and you're continuing the work that you've been doing to get other activists and other young people engaged in this movement. And finally, I'm going to introduce our last panelist, a woman who really needs no introduction, former Congresswoman and our organization's co-founder, Gabby Giffords. She's been leading the charge to pass background checks for many, many years. We have a brief video about her fight, so let's take a look.
What is courage? What does it look like? Courage shows truth to power and stands its ground. It's walking out. It's sitting down. It's marching towards something greater. Courage is telling your story even when it's hard to speak. Courage looks like this.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Gabby Giffords from Southern Arizona.
You know, you can either complain about something or you can try to fix it.
I will always extend my hand across the aisle to do what's right for the American people, to build consensus, and to get the job done.
Earlier today, a number of people were shot in Tucson, Arizona.
Arizona Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, wounded in an assassination attempt just about 2 weeks ago, is about to take the next big step along what's expected to be a long road to recovery.
It takes courage to keep going, especially when it feels impossible.
Than to witness the return of our colleague, who is the personification of courage, Congresswoman Gabby Giffords.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
It's standing up and finding your voice again. Courage is speaking out. Courage is saying, we can do better, and knowing no problem is too big to fix.
Gabby, I have so much I could say about how much you inspire me, but I'm going to turn it over to you to say a few words about hope.
I've known the darkest of days, days of pain and uncertain recovery. But confronted by despair, I've summoned hope. Confronted by paralysis and aphasia, I responded with grit and determination. I put one foot in front of the other. I found one word and then I found another. My recovery is a daily fight, but fighting makes me stronger. Words once came easily. Today I struggle to speak. But I have not lost my voice. America needs all of us to speak out, even when you have to fight to find the words. I'm also in a second fight, the fight to stop gun violence. It's also a fight forged by tragedy and pain, a fight that can change lives. We are at a crossroads. We can let the shootings continue, or we can act. We can protect our families, our future. We can vote. We can be on the right side of history. Please join us in this fight. Vote, vote, vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabby. That is so inspiring. Our work often requires us to address heavy issues and difficult subjects. So it is so nice to be reminded of the fact that there is hope and we all have a part to play. So I'm going to just jump into it. Ke'Shon and Senator Durbin, I want to start off with an issue that both of you spoke about in your introductory remarks. We have seen this country have a very long overdue conversation about what racial equity and justice look like and how gun violence plays into that. Here at Giffords, what we think our focus is on is how gun violence and discriminatory policing have disproportionately impacted Black and Brown people. Ke'Shon, this is your lived experience, as you alluded to. You know better than us the toll that gun violence can take on any community. So put us in your shoes. What does justice mean for you and the people in your neighborhood and for your family who live in fear of gun violence and might have acts of gun violence go unaddressed or unsolved?
Again, it's been years since the shooting and we still haven't found the killer. So just being able to find or just solve some of these unsolved cases of murder, or just making us feel safe enough to find some authority and go to them and not feel as if they're going to terrorize or kill us as well, or just giving us the resources for us to like prevail and develop inside of our community and not just let us allow the slums to just sit inside of there. Like, it's a lot of things that play into the community that I feel as if we can really address them, we could really find justice for that community and see a better day, a better tomorrow, and a more equal society.
Thank you, Ke'Shon, for sharing that. It's definitely very clear that the levels of gun violence that we have in this country, how it plays out on an everyday basis in certain communities like yours, is that the old methods of over-policing are not working, right? They're not actually protecting the communities that they're meant to serve. So I think there is a real concerted effort, and I hope we'll take it forward to really address gun violence and gun safety and safety of all communities in a meaningful way. Senator, you have done a lot of work on this issue, particularly in Chicago. Can you talk a little bit about some of that work and what you think some effective methods might be in creating safety?
Well, let me tell you, Robin, what happened in May in the city of Minneapolis, which we witnessed on the video of George Floyd, in a span of 8 minutes and 46 seconds, changed the United States and may have changed the world in its conversation about justice in policing. I'm sure that Gabby and I can both tell you, we know many, many men and women in law enforcement who are good, principled, decent people who are doing a great job keeping us safe. And we want to stand behind them. They're the good police that we desperately need every single day in America. But in their ranks, we've seen in Minneapolis, and again, many other places, Louisville, Kentucky, for example, that there are people who should not be wearing a badge and should not be carrying a gun. What they're doing is absolutely unacceptable and is discriminatory toward people of color, Black and Brown. We saw it again in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Jacob Blake, who was shot in the back 7 times and left paralyzed from the waist down. His family comes from Evanston, Illinois. They've been fighting in the civil rights movement for as long as I've known the name, and it's legendary in the area. And now we have this conversation as well about what we can do to make America safer. There are many things we can do, and we should do them as Democrats and Republicans. And one of the things we can do is to stop the wash of guns that are on the streets across America. They're in the hands of the wrong people. A simple background check, a universal background check to make sure that convicted felons and people who are mentally unstable do not purchase firearms is really the starting point that 90% of Americans agree on, including the majority of gun owners. So you say, well, Senator, now that you've said that, why didn't you pass the law? We're stopped. We're stopped by the gun lobby in the United States Senate and by the decision of the leadership in the Senate not to bring up the measure that has already passed the U.S. House of Representatives. We could return next week and pass a universal background check in the Senate in a matter of hours. What's stopping us is one senator, Senator McConnell of Kentucky, the Republican leader who is opposed to it. He just wanted to let us move it forward. And sadly, as he holds this bill up, more and more people are losing their lives. It was Ke'Shon's brother. It was Breonna Taylor. It was all the others who have been victims of gun violence. We need to take the guns out of the hands of people who will misuse them. And I hope that we can get that done quickly. If it takes a new administration in Washington, so be it.
Absolutely. And as Senator, you know that there are so many people that support this policy, right? And there are so many things that we can do to address gun violence, but we have to pass universal background checks as the foundational first step. A lot of the issues that we're talking about right now can be solved in other ways. As Ke'Shon noted, that there are programs and aspects of community work that's already happening, but it's not being funded in a significant or thoughtful way. And funding evidence-based, community-based gun violence prevention programs has been shown to be incredibly effective in cities across the country. But that's just one part of the puzzle. And just like background checks is part of the puzzle. And we know that the overwhelming majority of Americans support that policy. But Senator McConnell and President Trump are more interested in supporting the gun lobby than they are in supporting Americans who want us to do more to create safer communities. And this year, the stakes couldn't be higher, right? That we're really at a crossroads here. We're really at a precipice of gun violence in this country. And even though we're in the midst of a global pandemic, gun violence in America is still continuing to go up. So the time is now, and we have to act with some urgency. The other reason is that, quite frankly, the scope of our gun violence crisis is so vast that it touches all Americans, right? No family is immune from knowing somebody or having a member of their own family be a victim of gun violence. And I think, Gabby, for me personally, January 8th is a day that I will never forget, when you and others were shot at the Safeway in Tucson. And this upcoming January will mark 10 years since that day. What have you learned from your experiences over the past decade?
To be grateful for friends and family, and to live every day to the fullest.
Thank you, Gabby. Those are certainly wise words to live by. So again, we're looking for questions from the audience. And I think we've had a few that are come in. Don't forget to put your questions in the comments box or use the hashtag gun safety on Twitter. So before we get into the next round of questions, we have a video to share about why we're in this fight. So let's take a look.
For the first time since the Clinton administration, the House of Representatives passes significant gun legislation.
This bill would basically require background checks for almost every gun sale or gun transfer in America.
Enough is enough. And our first order of business in the Senate should be to pass the House Background Checks Act.
As long as I'm the majority leader of the Senate, none of that stuff is going anywhere. I am indeed the Grim Reaper.
Over 90% of Americans support expanding background checks.
By closing these loopholes, we will make our communities safer.
We have a mission. We have an obligation. It is the right thing to do to save lives.
The Senate is a firewall for the NRA.
And change must come to Washington.
There are now more activists on the side of gun safety than on the side of the NRA.
Now is the time to come together. Be courageous. The nation's counting on you.
Before we get into audience questions, I wanted to mention that in the video that we just saw, we saw Congressman John Lewis, who recently passed away. Congressman Lewis was obviously an inspiration to so many, and a gun safety champion who dedicated his entire life to justice. Senator, I know that you were able to work alongside him in Congress. I was wondering if you could share a bit about what it was like to know John Lewis.
Robin, thank you. He was my friend for some 30 years. And I remember one particular day about 10 years ago when I was down on a Faith and Hope pilgrimage to Alabama with John Lewis. And we ended up, because of my schedule, a trip over to Selma, Alabama to Edmund Pettus Bridge, just the two of us, because I had to leave on a flight earlier than expected. And John and I walked that same bridge that he went over before he was clubbed and almost killed so many years ago. It was a really touching moment, just the two of us that Sunday morning. And I think back so many times, and I've thought so many times about the courage that young man displayed, the same kind of courage that we see in Gabby Giffords, her comeback from her terrible injury and the inspirational leadership she brings. John Lewis and Gabby Giffords are in the same league in my mind. They're people who believe as I do, but have sacrificed much more to prove that belief is worth fighting for.
Thank you, Senator, for sharing that. I know that I speak for both Gabby and myself when I say that he inspired all of us, and his legacy has left big shoes for all of us to fill. So we are working hard to do that every day. Now we are going to take some questions from the audience. Ke'Shon, this first question is for you, and it comes from Dev in Chicago. Dev asks, Ke'Shon, your story really resonates with me as somebody who has also lost loved ones to gun violence. Often it's hard for me to share their stories. How do you turn grief into action, and what advice do you have for other people who might want to do the same?
I say you always have a voice. It probably wouldn't be speaking up in front of thousands. It probably wouldn't be going in front of a camera and like speaking your words, but any way that you can, like voice yourself, tell people your story, let them know what's going on, try to figure out so that nobody else has to go through that same situation, that problem, that grief, the pain, anything like that. So however you can, just speak out and voice yourself and let people know like the narrative of your story.
Thank you, Ke'Shon. That is so important to remember, and I think is a really powerful example of how to use your own personal history and personal tragedy and turn it into action and to give a voice to somebody who no longer has one. Senator Durbin, this next question is for you. Something we've talked a lot about this afternoon or in this discussion on gun violence has been how different connections or different experiences with firearms can inform somebody's views on gun safety. Rachel from Peoria asks you this next question. She says, Senator, I'm a gun owner and I've happily complied with all of the state mandated background checks and laws to ensure that I'm responsible. What I don't understand is why we also need national background check laws.
Well, I can tell you it's a question of geography. Illinois is located smack dab in the middle of this country, surrounded by many states. Some of them have good laws when it comes to gun safety and background checks, but unfortunately some do not. And it's just a few minutes in a car to go over to northwestern Indiana to a gun show, and without a background check to buy as many handguns as you think you can afford, take them back into the gang-infested neighborhoods of Chicago and spread them around. Those guns become tools of death and destruction in the city of Chicago. So the people say, well, Chicago's got the toughest gun law, and yet it has all this gun violence. I'm sorry to say that we're the third highest rated state when it comes to importing firearms from other states. And that has made our situation that much worse in Illinois and in the city of Chicago. We need a national standard, a national universal background check to keep guns out of the hands of people who would misuse them.
Absolutely. And Senator, such a great point that we can't have this patchwork of state laws. And in Illinois, as you know better than anybody else, there's a very strong laws, and folks on the ground are continuing to strengthen laws like strengthening the background check system in Illinois through the bio bill, which is working its way through the state legislature right now. But we have to do more, right? And having a patchwork is not acceptable, and it's clearly not creating safer communities, regardless of the fact that Illinois has stronger laws. Gabby, I know that you are optimistic about the future. So this last question is for you, and it comes from Susie in Naperville. She asks, Gabby, your strength is so inspiring to me. With everything our country is dealing with right now, you still seem hopeful and determined. How do you stay positive?
I want to make the world a better place.
Well, I think that's a great note to end our question and answer session period on. Thank you, Gabby, so much. Before we sign off, I want to make sure that our panel have an opportunity to say a few last words. Ke'Shon, do you mind kicking us off?
Well, I really just want to say speak up and really show your voice. Like if it's just going out to vote, please vote. It's really where you can voice yourself and have somebody that really represents you to really, speak up for what you need inside of your area, and really just shows like how responsible and how they prioritize people inside the community. So, really look into who you're voting for, because, we got some great people out here, but we got to vote for them in.
Absolutely. And one of those great people is, of course, Senator Durbin. So, Senator Durbin, do you have a few closing remarks?
Well, we mentioned John Lewis earlier, and he reminded all of us that there are times when we needed to get into good trouble.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of those moments when it comes to so many issues across America. And I also might say that we need leaders that bring about good change, and that's Gabby Giffords. What she has done with Giffords is incredible. It has become a major voice in Washington and our national dialogue. What I want to say to people across the country is do not give up. 90% of us are not wrong. We are right. If we are going to have firearms in America, we want them to be in the hands of people who use them responsibly and safely, not those who are going to misuse them. And some we know by their backgrounds are inclined to do just that. So it's important for us to stand up and don't believe that we can't win this fight. We can win it. So many things we have seen change in America because people just won't take no for an answer. We've got to convince Senator McConnell, I hope we can, to change his position. And if we can't, we have to replace him. We have to find a way to use the Senate so it effectively represents the people of America and makes this a safer nation. That's what lies ahead. That's why I'm running for re-election, and many others are joining me in this effort to support Giffords and to support sensible gun control and to say to the American people, don't give up on this democracy. We hear you. We're going to change it for the better. And Gabby Giffords, when it happens, you're going to be right there celebrating that moment in history, which will make such a difference in the lives of Ke'Shon and so many others across America.
Absolutely, Senator. I think you're completely correct. Gun safety is on the ballot this year in a way that we've never seen before. And we really need everyone to take action, because right now the Senate is controlled by Mitch McConnell and the gun lobby allies who time and time again have blocked any progress on this issue. So we need to make sure that we're electing gun safety candidates. In Illinois, that means re-electing Senator Durbin. And in states across the country, that means making sure you know who you're voting for, as Ke'Shon said, and you know their record on gun safety. Because without having those key gun safety candidates in office, we will not be able to make progress. So I think it's obvious that we need to use our power at the ballot box. And from now until November, do everything that you can. Here in Illinois, that means going to www.durbinforsenate.com. It means talking to your friends and family about who they're voting for, volunteering your time, having a plan to vote, casting your vote. And it is so critical. The stakes could not be higher, and we need all of you to participate. So thanks to everybody for joining in today. So far on this tour, we've talked to over 1 million Americans, and we're going to be coming back to you on the road next week with a few more stops. So thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.